Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. 20146 is your SMS line, hashtag business AM. This is your economic review. All right, let's get into it therefore. Now, the CBK's monetary policy meeting has opted to retain the central bank rate at 7% for the 6th consecutive time during its first rate setting meeting of the year yesterday. In a statement, CBK Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge has said the decision to signal a status quo on lending rates follows the committee's conclusion that the current monetary policy stance remains adequate against the backdrop of economic policy measures that have been implemented since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in March last year. According to the CBK Governor, loans amounting to 1.63 trillion shillings, which is equivalent to 54.2% of the total banking sector loan book, 3 trillion shillings, had been restructured by the end of December, in line with the emergency measures announced by the CBK on March 18th to provide relief to borrowers. On this, personal and household loans amounting to 333 billion shillings have had the repayment period extended. He further said 32.6 billion shillings out of the 35.2 billion shillings was released through the lowering of the cash reserve ratio. CRR in March has been used to support lending, especially to the tourism, trade and transport and communication of real estate, manufacturing and agriculture sectors. Now, the MPC noted that the growth in the private sector credit stood at 8.4% in the 12 months to December 2020 as demand recovered with improved economic activity. Strong credit growth was observed in manufacturing, transport and communications, agriculture, real estate and consumer durables sectors. However, the ratio of gross non-performing loans to gross loans stood at 14.1% in December, considered or compared to 13.6% in October, with NPL increases noted in the transport and communications, trade, real estate and agriculture sectors. Now, the rate setting committee further noted the leading indicators for the Kenyan economy point to a recovery, particularly in the fourth quarter of 2020 from the disruptions earlier in the year. Now, the recovery is supported largely by strong performance in the agriculture and construction sectors, resilient exports and continued recovery in manufacturing and services. The MPC further said inflation remains well anchored and is expected to remain within the target range in the near term, adding that the recently introduced tax measures are expected to have a modest impact on the overall inflation. That's it. Just before that, let's now look at exactly what the CBK lending rates have been throughout the entire of that time. But before we go that, let's look at that NPL book before we actually cross over and look at the average CBK lending rates. And you can actually see from that data that we have for you this morning that if you look at where we are in the NPL book, you have to talk about March 2020. That's why the rain started beating us. Yes, it has been rising, but there's that jump again as from March 2020 that will tell you exactly where we are right now in terms of that NPL, because it's saying it is 14.1% and could jump to 17% should the economy tank. Joining us in the studio this morning to talk to us about just relevance of that MPC setting, we do have the CEO, Miradi Capital, Abraham Mudogo. Abraham, I want to ask you this question.
Yes.
I mean, did we lose relevance for the CBR?
It's interesting you say that. Yeah, we've retained 7% 6 times in a row.
Yes.
And what has happened, it is true, and I think we need to call it. I think that rate has become stale.
Yes.
And what happens when you have a monetary or any policy tool that becomes stale, then it loses the impact it's supposed to have.
Yes.
Because now you become predictable, because people know you're going to stay at 7, and it does not have the desired effect in full. Maybe in part, but not in full. Look at the matrix. Our inflation is at 5.6.
Yes.
So it's within the range of 5% plus or minus 2.5. So they're good there. Look at the dollar. Dollar is 110. Look at the pound, 150. The euro, 130. So those have gone up. You see, now with in economics, there's something called the Phillips curve, where you trade off interest rate versus the inflation, and I think that's what they're trying to play around. That since our inflation is down, then let's not play around with let's not play around with our interest rates.
Yes.
But I think time has come when we have to call it and decide what is that we want to do. You've shown some very grim statistics about the status of debt in this country. That is, we're talking about private sector debt.
Yes.
3 trillion lent out, 1.6 restructured. So what does that mean? That 1.6, had it not been restructured, would be bad.
Yes.
That is what it is. And on top of that, the bad debt stock has moved up from 13 to 14%. So what are we saying? We're saying that had there been no moratoriums, we'd be sitting at a bad debt of 50 plus.
Yes.
And what we are saying also is that what we have simply done, we have changed the ruler in which we measure quality of debt.
Yes.
But that does not per se improve the quality of that debt.
Yes.
So there's still an inherent problem of what are we really sitting on? And by changing rulers and measures and how we qualify what is bad and what is good,
yes,
sorry, are we improving the quality of that debt?
Yes.
This restructure measure, the restructure measure and the moratoriums, those are short-term measures, and they cannot carry us into 2021.
Yes.
2021 we have to do something different, and what we have to do differently is now through MPC, through the monetary policy, through the fiscal policy, intervene in the economy and spy it to where we want it to go.
Yes.
To achieve this 6-7% that we want it to achieve.
Yes.
Because only then can this debt get fixed. Because we can keep measuring it and remeasuring it and recalibrating it to look good. But basically sometimes, we may actually be flogging a dead horse. And we need to be careful that we don't go that route. So coming backwards, monetary policy and fiscal policy are complementary and not in competition. And one should not fix the messes of the other. We are looking at monetary policy, trying to fix interest rates, trying to fix for the forex rates, trying to fix the money supply. That's what it does. Fiscal is about revenue collection and consumption of that revenue.
Yes.
Now, our tax regime, the other day, we've pulled out all our rebates. The brakes have all been pulled out. So yes, our revenue may be rising. But then again, on the consumption side, we are looking at a 3T budget. The revenue collection at best can go to 2T. So again, we are back to where we started. We'll do a T plus in terms of more debt. So I think our fiscal discipline and our fiscal policy, we need to rethink it very carefully, because I don't think it's sustainable in the way we're doing it. And it keeps putting pressure on the monetary policy to try and fix what the fiscal policy should have been fixing. And that is why we are seeing whatever is going on. You can see you can see now the dollar. The dollar, we started the year early, it was at 101, 102. Now it's 110.
110, yes.
And the day it breached 110, it was flying, and syndicate had to intervene. So I'm saying, in a nutshell, I think this is the year of reality. Let's deal with things as they are.
Yes.
Yeah, and also we call them by their right names.
Pretty much. All right, let me introduce George Bodo into the discussion this morning. George Bodo, can you confirm that you can get us in the studio loud and clear? But yes, Bodo, could you unmute your mic?
Good morning, Simba.
Good morning, man. I gotta say this. Happy New Year.
It's too late for that.
It's too late for that. This is the first time we're speaking, so wow, it fits. Well, Bodo, let me talk to you. Talk to us about this magical number, the 7%. What is your assessment of the MPC's stance during the coronavirus pandemic? Let's begin from there.
No, I was listening to Abraham.
Yes.
And I think I want to agree with what he said. I think for me, monetary policy is held hostage for a number of things. One is that the fiscal dominance. You have a government that is hell bent on funding a huge budget at all costs. right? And that has exerted a lot of pressures for monetary policy to come through, and I don't think it can, or
Yes.
it can to a large extent. And even if you look at the press statement, what the MPC said, they inserted a line there that there are a number of measures that are under consideration to support the fiscal performance. And I think what they were trying to say here is that they are standing ready to print money. That's my assessment of that statement. And then, so beyond fiscal dominance, you also have a credit market that is not acting.
Yes.
So, what monetary policy today, in my assessment in Kenya, is meant to realize price stability. And how do you realize price stability? It's by controlling the amount of money in circulation, and then you use that interest rate tool. Now, if for the last, I don't know how many times, the central bank, using that CBR, which is, by the way, it's a policy signal tool. It doesn't usually mean a lot. It's
Yes.
a signal. They've been signaling that they want the banks to extend credit at a higher rate. You know, the banks basically to increase that money-making machine to the economy. The problem is that the demand side of the economy doesn't have that capacity to borrow. And if you look at, for instance, the rate of private sector credit growth over the last 1 year,
Yes.
it's been stuck at single-digit territory. So that means that the conventional monetary policy will not work in the current environment. They've got to do some unconventional tools. And finally, you also have the foreign exchange market, which has been very chaotic over the last 1 year.
Yes.
And I think that they've really battled, by the way, they've really battled over the last 3 months to bring it under control. And that takes a lot of resources, taking a lot of their resources. So then what we have is monetary policy facing what I call a trinity of impossibility. And that for me is a problem.
All right, George, I'm going to come back to you therefore. I mean, Abraham, you two gentlemen are saying, wow, I mean, that's some meeting that it's neither here nor there, therefore. I mean, they got to sit. Well, Abraham, therefore, explain to me, therefore, if indeed they are caught between a hard rock and between a hard place and a rock and a hard place,
Yes.
that they get returning at 7%. But talk to me about this fiscal side. Do they have to look at it before they give us that? And how much do you think there's a consolidation of the fiscal side before we get that MPC? Now, let me take you back to where we are. Because now, if you look at Njoroge, he's saying that, well, if you go to quarter, but we're still waiting for the numbers of quarter four. We still haven't seen them. They're saying that if you go to quarter four of 2020, then the economy is going to rebound better than it did in quarter three because we went into recession in quarter three. Well, is that better yet? A stance for them to say, well, we are building on the numbers of quarter four to give you this 7%. Is that enough to say that it's only the rebound in quarter four, which we haven't seen, that is going to give us this 7% that we are stuck on?
You see, even if you use that logic,
Yes.
then if there's rebound, then the number should not stay constant.
Yes.
Yeah, if you use that logic. So, personally, I think, number one, the Monetary Policy Committee is a monetary policy committee. It cannot deal with fiscal issues.
Yes.
There's only one. I think there's only one member who sits in both. I think the PS
Yes.
Treasury. He sits in both. So and Treasury is the only institution that has a bird's eye view of both institutions.
Yes.
The one, the custodian of the monetary policy, which is the CBK, and the custodian of the fiscal policy, which by and large is between Treasury and KRA. Now, you ask how. Are they in sync?
Yes.
Not necessarily. Because, see, the monetary policy works well when there's fiscal discipline. When there's fiscal indiscipline, that indiscipline spills over to the financial markets. So the monetary policy now becomes captive to the fiscal, and now spends all its time cleaning up what the fiscal policy is creating.
Yes.
So to be fair, everybody needs to do their job. The fiscal, we have two issues. We have to reduce our spending. The budgets as currently being done is not sustainable. We
Yes.
said it here and we'll continue to say it. It's not sustainable because our revenues are dwindling with what is going on. And even if without even talk about dwindling, we have to start moving towards balancing our budgets because we have two monsters in the room: debt service and public wage bill, which consumed over 50%
Yes.
of what we of our budget, not even what we collect, because it consumes nearly everything we collect.
Yes.
Not just those two.
Yes.
Debt service is not hard to do because it's just there are solutions within debt swaps, within restructure, and that can be a conversation for another day. But those solutions are there. When it comes to the wage bill, there's SRC, which has a clear mandate and which is very clear how they want to go. I think we just need to put some more political will into that, and I think we'll get there. So if that starts getting sorted, then
Can I come in there?
Yes, Bodo, I'm actually just crossing over to you shortly. Abraham is clearing his sentiment on that. Yes.
Then once and then KRA,
Yes.
once KRA also improves and widens their net in terms of what they collect,
Yes.
then that gets sorted out.
Yes.
Then now MPC also now starts getting a bit bolder in terms of starting to push this rate downwards, because that's where we need to go, because as Bodo has alluded, the demand side cannot afford credit at the price we're putting it up.
Pretty
so we
much.
have to start pushing the credit down, and it has been done.
Yes.
In the Kibaki regime, we went to a single to sub 1, so it can be done.
Pretty much. All right, Bodo, let me just ask you the same question because I know you want to jump in on that as well. Bodo, how dominating is fiscal policy in this MPC stance at a 7%?
You can see it's so much, and you can see fiscal dominance in the entirety of 2019 and even the entirety of 2020.
Yes.
In those MPC meetings, and what is fiscal dominance? Fiscal dominance is when MPC has to take care of, as what Abraham says, it has to clean up for the failures of the fiscal side.
Yes.
And let me just give some illustration. You have seen the budget policy statement for 2021-2022, and you have seen the expenditure outlines. The government wants to spend about 2.9 trillion Kenyan shillings
Yes.
the next fiscal year, and they want to fund it via revenues to the tune of 1.9 trillion. So then you have a trillion shillings budget, right?
Yes.
Now that is fiscal indiscipline. Why would the government run fiscal deficit 1 trillion Kenyan shillings?
Yes.
Where are they going to raise the 1 trillion Kenyan shillings balance? And by the way, even the current fiscal year, the fiscal deficit in nominal terms is 1 trillion Kenyan shillings. How are they going to fund that? And it's going to be wider, because if you look at the revenue performance for the first 6 months, July to December 31st,
Yes.
they've only collected 42% of the entire projected revenues for the fiscal year. That means that they will not meet the target. And that leaves a huge gap. And that's what should have been done in the current, what they should have done in the budget policy statement for 2021-2022
Yes.
is to actually restrict the spending to the resource envelope, which they haven't. You're planning to raise about 2 trillion Kenyan shillings, thereabouts, right? And you want to spend 2.9 trillion. Why can't you spend 2 trillion, right? That is what we call fiscal indiscipline. And now that's going to mean that and the monetary policy side would have to support that gap. And if you look at, for instance, what the monetary policy said in the communique, they added a very controversial line there, in my view, that additional measures to strengthen the fiscal performance are under consideration. Whatever that means. But I see a situation where they would have to print money, basically what I call deficit monetization, to support the fiscal side. But in my earlier conversation somewhere elsewhere, I've also argued that in the current environment,
Yes,
where we're dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, the government can be allowed to overrun expenditures temporarily and run wide deficits.
Yes.
This fiscal year, we're going to run about 10%, right? Next year, they've projected 7.5%. That's on paper. In actual sense, I think the deficit is going to be above 10%. But the central bank will still have to support. And I'm getting back to your question, how dominating the fiscal side is. It is extremely dominating, and monetary policy will still be held hostage. for the next couple of meetings.
Pretty much. Now, gentlemen, I want us to take a break because there's something that Governor Joroge mentioned, that 54% of outstanding loans had been restructured by the close of Q4 of 2020. Makes you say, and ask you the question, what is the health of the financial services sector as we do all of it in 2021? Because Bodo and Abraham, I gotta remind you, there's one thing that Governor Joroge has ever said since we got in the coronavirus pandemic. And the man at the Treasury office, they said our banking industry, our financial services sector is quite stable. We have enough to cushion us from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Is that so? As we start 2021, once we come from this short break here on Business AM.